This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. Mo Huayuan looked at the 5 items and casually pointed at them. This 4-revolution pillet is then. President Kuan Xian, please provide 2 sets of ingredients. Mi Xian was extremely unwilling, he wanted to avoid conflict between the two as much as possible, so he shirked. Master Mo, I don't have the materials for this 4th revolution true pill on me. Let's have a competition, young Master Yun is too arrogant. Alright, I'm done. You don't have it, but I do. Mo Huayuan bellowed. Little Xian, come here. He shouted. The greedy and lecherous young man who had been guarding the door earlier jogged in. Under Mo Huayuan's orders, he took out 2 sets of the same ingredients. He looked at the atmosphere in the room with a strange expression, shrank his neck, and carefully retreated to a corner of the room. This master, please check the 2 sets of materials and then choose one first. Mo Huayuan stared at Yunxiao coldly and laughed in anger. Yunxiao gave it a quick scan with his divine sense and found nothing strange about the materials. He smiled and said, I'm fine with it. Humph. Mo Huayuan snorted heavily. He couldn't be bothered to say anything more. He immediately picked up a set of materials, wrapped them in soul power, and began to refine them. He now felt that it was too much to talk to Yunxiao. All he wanted to do was defeat him as soon as possible, then take his head and see if he could still be as cool as he was now when he cut off his head. Yunxiao smiled and did not mind. It would be strange if Mo Huayuan's attitude was good. He slowly relaxed his body. It was very difficult to defeat an 8th-tier alchemist in refining, even if he had just advanced. He had to go all out, so he shouted, Demonic Dragon, fuse. The demonic dragon's extremely unhappy voice came from his soul. It even had a hint of anger as it said, don't try to fuse for no reason. If we can't be separated in the future, I'll find a place to cry to death. Can't you just drag this little alchemist into the Divine Realm tablet and torture him if you don't like him? Do you have to go through so much trouble? Just do as I say. Yunxiao said angrily. Why are you talking so much nonsense to me? Helplessly, the dragon could only gradually merge with Yunxiao's soul, and a demonic soul power gradually rose. Yuan Gaohan had seen his soul battle technique before, so he didn't find it strange. He only secretly praised, it's indeed a good idea to improve the strength of one's soul with the help of the soul-devouring clan's soul battle technique. This method may open another door for alchemists to improve their strength. The 4 people in the room could not stay calm as they watched Yunxiao transform into a demon. His face changed from a handsome man to an extremely demonic one. There were even scales on his body, which was a visual conflict. Is this the secret technique of the Swan and I demon race? Mo Huayuan was shocked, not by his appearance, but by the fact that his opponent's soul power was increasing at an extremely fast speed. What kind of secret technique was this? Looking at his appearance, he seemed to be a descendant of a dragon. The peak of the 6th step. Have you stopped? While Mo Huayuan was refining the pill casually, he kept an eye on Yunxiao's changes. The vast soul power finally stopped when it reached the peak of the 6th tier. Yunxiao stepped forward, picked up the materials, and began to refine them. What? He's not using a cauldron? Everyone was taken aback, especially Mo Huayuan, whose face instantly darkened. Yunxiao was trying to compete with him on the same level, which was an extremely humiliating thing for him, an 8th-tier alchemist. After snorting heavily, he ignored Yunxiao and sped up the refinement of the materials in his hand. Although they were both condensed out of thin air, their techniques were completely different. Mo Huayuan's moves looked much more beautiful and gaudy. Every move was extremely pleasing to the eye. His movements were as neat as those from the textbook, giving people a wonderful feeling. They were gradually entranced by it. On the other hand, Yunxiao's side was completely the opposite. Every move he made was extremely stiff, as if he was imitating someone else. What he used was the basic refining technique of the 12 styles of flying flower and falling snow, which gave people a strong feeling that he was just using a rigid method. At first, little Xuanzi was shocked by the soul power in his body, and he was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. He thought that he might have offended a great alchemist because of his disrespect to these people. But at this moment, when he saw his refining technique, he could only laugh. He was even worse than him. Mo Huayuan took a look as well. After a moment of shock, he continued with his own refinement. However, after taking a few more looks, a strange feeling arose in his heart. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. After taking a few more looks and confirming that there were no problems, he was too lazy to pay attention to it. Although Jin Xian was not an alchemist, she had never eaten pork before, but she had seen a pig run. As soon as Yunxiao used this technique, she could immediately tell who was better. She slapped her forehead, knowing that she was doomed. Moreover, he was extremely puzzled in his heart. This level could be reached by many ordinary people, so why did Ling choose him? Yuan Gaohan, who was in the Divine Realm tablet, suddenly asked, Li Yunxiao, who did you learn these 12 styles from? Yunxiao's heart skipped a beat as he said coldly, are you trying to chat with me so that I can be distracted and help your disciple win? Yuan Gaohan fell silent. He also knew that this kind of competition couldn't be divided, but the doubts in his heart were getting heavier and heavier. Although Yunxiao's movements were clumsy, there was not the slightest mistake. Moreover, each movement was disassembled and linked together without any sense of disharmony, and if one looked carefully, they would find that it was natural. However, these were not the most important things. What was most important, and even ignored by Mo Huayuan, was that the speed and purity of the various materials Yunxiao was refining were gradually surpassing Mo Huayuan's. In other words, Yunxiao had already won the first round of refining materials. No matter what, Yuan Gaohan found it hard to accept. Usually, a person who could purify more than 90% of the ingredients could be considered a master, and at Mo Huayuan's level, he could even approach 95%. However, this stage was not the key to victory, so even in a competition, very few people would pay attention to the purity of the other party. But not paying attention didn't mean that this stage was easy. Under Yuan Gaohan's gaze, he could clearly see that the materials Yunxiao had purified were at least 1% higher than Mo Huayuan's. This kind of difference was very difficult to appear after it had already reached 95% purity. It was especially so when the gap between two alchemists was very small, and any link could be the key to victory. Hiss hiss. After the purification was completed, a light blue flame appeared on Mo Huayuan's finger. It grew bigger and bigger in the air, and the color became more and more vivid. Then, it burned the purified raw materials. That's right. Huayuan has completely refined the inner flame of the ninth order heavenly flame demonic stallion. Yuan Gaohan revealed a look of admiration, and the previous solemnness was swept away. This competition had no suspense. However, he was suddenly stunned. Thinking of the terrifying divine fire contained in the Divine Realm tablet, he trembled all over. He can't be using the Phoenix divine fire in the outside world, can he? If that was the case, then the flame would be able to completely suppress the inner flame of the Tianfan demon flame stallion and obtain a huge advantage. Could it be that the true Phoenix flame is what this kid is relying on? Can the absolute suppression of flames overcome the gap of 2 ranks in spirit power? Yuan Gaohan's face was also filled with uncertainty. After all, he had never seen a 10th order flame before and had only read about it in sporadic ancient records. Finally, when Yunxiao had also finished the purification, a flame shot out from between his eyebrows. It was only the size of a fingernail, which made it look insignificant. Jin Xian felt completely hopeless. She had thought that this kid had an extraordinary temperament and was very arrogant when he spoke, so he would at least have some real skills. Now, it seemed that had not only harmed him, but also Tianyuan Trading Company. Just as she was letting her thoughts run wild and her heart was in a mess. The nail-sized flame shot into the purified raw materials, and with a bang, it devoured all the raw materials like fireworks. The place where it burned just happened to cover the materials, and there was no excess at all. Yuan Gaohan's pupils contracted. This kind of exquisite control was impossible to achieve without being thoroughly tempered. Yunxiao's hands were very fresh and tender, not like the rough hands that stayed in front of the cauldron all day long to refine. This time, not only Yuan Gaohan, but Mo Huayuan also finally realized that something was wrong, and his expression changed drastically. To his horror, he found that the internal fire of the heavenly flame full, which he was burning the raw materials, was desperately burning away from Yunxiao, as if it had seen something extremely terrible and was trying to escape. This flame had long been refined into the state of mind and spirit as one. He could directly feel the fear from the flame. It was the pressure of an absolute level, which made his own flame terrified. This buy-in. Mo Huayuan was completely dumbfounded. He even forgot about his refining in that instant, and his hands stopped moving. His was the inner flame of a level 9 heavenly Brahma demonic flame stallion. Was there a flame in the world that could suppress it so? Even those peak 9th grade flames on the continent were only of the same grade. Even if they were a little higher, it was impossible to produce such a level of pressure. To be able to suppress a flame that could cause a 9th grade flame to produce a terrifying chill, this Swan and I had nothing else other than the 10th grade divine realm flame. Mo Huayuan sucked in a breath of cold air. Other than feeling his body tremble, there was also an indescribable feeling. He never thought that he would be able to see a 10th tier flame in his lifetime. What made him speechless was that he was now competing in the art of Tao with the owner of the 10th tier flame. What was even more dizzying was that the owner of this 10th grade flame was actually a teenager in his teens. He was extremely shocked. Even though refining 4 revolution pills was a very simple process, he started to make mistakes. In the distance, little Xuanzi didn't understand the problem with the flames. Seeing Mo Huayuan stop, he cried out in surprise, "Master, you're refining a kasaya." Mo Huayuan's heart jolted in shock, and it was only then that he realized that he was still in the middle of a competition. If he were to lose, his reputation would be at stake. The most important thing was his master's reputation, as well as the matter regarding Wanwan. He couldn't let anything go wrong. He bit the tip of his tongue, and the pain immediately jolted him awake. He began to clear his mind of all distracting thoughts. To him, this was a competition that he could not lose. From the moment the true phoenix fire appeared, he had kept all his underestimation and became extremely cautious. He had never heard of anyone who could collect a 10th grade flame, but he was sure that they were definitely not ordinary people. Moreover, his inner fire of the Tianfan demonic flame full was greatly affected. If he could not control it with all his heart and soul, there was a possibility of failure even if he was an 8th tier alchemist. Thinking of this, his heart became even more nervous. He hurriedly used his soul power to surround his inner flame, forming a defensive barrier that isolated the aura of the true phoenix flame. Only then did the Tianfan demon flame stallion's inner flame return to normal, and the entire refinement was pulled back from the edge of failure. Wu Chen said dejectedly, "President, I'm afraid young Master Yun is done for. Look at Master Mo's flame, he was casually playing with it, and his expression was extremely relaxed. Young Master Yun has just started a small fire, and he's already so tired that he's sweating and his face is pale. It looks like he can't hold on any longer." Mo Huayuan's face turned red, and a hint of anger flashed across his face. He thought that Wu Chen was deliberately mocking him, so he snorted angrily and concentrated on refining. On the other hand, Jin Xian frowned slightly. Although she also felt that Yunxiao's expression was a little exaggerated, Mo Huayuan also seemed to have become a little off. He did not seem as relaxed as before, but more solemn and determined. "Don't talk nonsense," she said to Wu Chen. "Let's wait and see. The results are not out yet. Who knows what will happen? You and I are not alchemists." A mocking voice rang out. Little Xianzi had a playful look on his face, and he sneered disdainfully, "The two of you can't be so naive as to think that this hothead can defeat my master, right?" Wu Chen didn't have a good impression of him, so he said coldly, "At least young Master Yun is stronger than you, right? He's only a few years older than you, but his strength is far from what you can hope to catch up to." "Humph, so what if he's strong? If he loses this time, his head will roll on the ground." A sinister look flashed across little Xian's face, and his eyes were filled with a little viciousness. Yunxiao's appearance put a lot of pressure on him, and his sense of superiority in the past was gone. Jinshuan's heart tightened, and she exchanged a look with Wu Chen. Both of them had the same idea, and they had to keep Yunxiao alive no matter what. Soon, the calcination was completed, and the process of condensation began. This was the most important stage, where the soul power and techniques of alchemists were competed, which was also the critical moment that really determined the grade. Yunxiao took a deep breath and performed his best technique, the Illusionary Waves Heavenly Sutra. He had created this technique himself, and it was the most suitable for him. Most importantly, he could use every bit of his soul power to the extreme without wasting a single bit. The difference between him and Mo Huayuan was the difference of 2 ranks of soul power. This was also the most difficult part. Only when he executed every move to the extreme, in addition to Mo Huayuan's previous underestimation of his opponent and indifference, would he have any hope of winning. Gu Feiyang's elusive waves technique? Yuan Gaohan frowned slightly and muttered to himself. When Gu Feiyang was teaching in the Sea of Soul formation, many people did learn this skill, but it was a bit difficult. He was even more shocked. After the cultivation technique was spread out, he had studied it for a while, and he had his own understanding of it. Now, when he saw Yunxiao using it, it seemed to be even more powerful than his own understanding. He was a 9th-tier great alchemist. Although it was someone else's cultivation technique, he had mastered it, and he could understand the essence of many things with just a glance. But, why did he feel that his understanding was still not enough after watching Yunxiao perform it? Just like the 12 basic alchemy techniques, he also felt that Yunxiao's understanding was above his. It was completely unreasonable and impossible. These 2 techniques were created by Gu Feiyang. Could this person be Yang Di's disciple? However, even Yang Di might not be able to display such essence and meaning. All of these had nothing to do with the level of alchemy, but was a kind of enlightenment in the Tao of alchemy, which could only be achieved with supreme wisdom and painstaking cultivation. Who was this kid? Yuan Gohan's heart was covered with a thick layer of doubt. It was already hard to understand that a teenager could become a 6th-tier alchemist, and he could not be simply described as a genius. He dared not even imagine that he could defeat an 8th-tier alchemist. It was only now that Yunxiao's disadvantage of insufficient soul power was finally revealed, as his speed was getting slower and slower. With his current soul power, it would be easy for him to concoct a 4-revolution true pill. However, if he wanted to defeat Mo Huayuan, he would have to raise the quality of the pill to supreme grade or even higher. This required the constant use of incantation gestures and soul power to remove the impurities in the process of condensation, as well as allowing the various materials to achieve the best degree of fusion. This included the mutual promotion and restraint of the attributes, as well as the order of fusion, percentage, and so on. It required powerful strength to do it precisely. Yunxiao's divine sense was constantly analyzing and mixing the proportions of the various raw materials and the time needed to fuse them, allowing them to be completed one by one. The speed was extremely slow, and from an outsider's point of view, it looked like a large mass of various raw materials was continuously fusing together. Mo Huayuan's side was clearly much faster. Even little Xian couldn't tell what was going on, and a smug smile appeared on his face. He snorted from time to time as he glanced at the worried Jin Xian and the other woman. Mo Huayuan took the time to glance at Yunxiao, and his pupils constricted violently. His vision was naturally not comparable to little Xuanzi's, so he could immediately see the brilliance of Yunxiao's technique and the use of soul power. He could not help but turn pale with fright, and his hands fluttered a few times in a panic, causing many minor mistakes to appear. Yuan Gaohan frowned and sighed slightly. He thought to himself, Huayuan has always been in closed-door cultivation and has never been disturbed by outsiders every time he refines. In this kind of competition, he lacked the experience of facing his opponent in battle. From the beginning until now, he had been distracted by his opponent's behavior at least 5 times. Each time, he had caused a slight mistake in the refining. If the 2 of them had similar strength, he would have lost this round long ago. On the other hand, Yunxiao had been focusing all his energy on the raw materials in front of him since the beginning of the refinement. He did not even glance at Mo Huayuan, as if he was the only one in the world. That kind of concentration was even less like a competition, but more like he was enjoying the fun of refining alone. This was a pure alchemist. Even Yuan Gaohan was stunned at this moment, as if he had seen the shadow of the art of alchemy in Yunxiao, the miniature of thousands of alchemists pursuing this path. This buy-in. Yuan Gaohan was completely dumbfounded, having an indescribable feeling. He found that Mo Huayuan could not beat him in any way except in terms of soul power, and he was even far from it. Even if it was him, suppressing his soul power to the peak of the sixth step, would he be able to win? As soon as the thought flashed through his mind, he was shocked, because he found that even he, with Yunxiao's current soul power, was not confident that he could do as well as Yunxiao. It meant that Yunxiao's field of alchemy was no less than his, a ninth-tier existence. Shocking. At this moment, other than extreme shock, Yuan Gaohan was also extremely terrified. How could there be such a heaven-defying existence in this world? In the thousands of years of the heavenly martial continent, among the many geniuses who had been praised by the later generations, the most brilliant one was Yi Nantian, who had refined Noah's boat. Even Yi Nantian couldn't be so talented at such a young age. Mo Huayuan also felt himself panicking. He gradually discovered that Yunxiao's elusive waves technique was executed smoothly, and the Tao of magic contained in it was even beyond his reach. Cold sweat began to break out on his forehead, and his clothes were gradually drenched in sweat. His heart was in a mess. At this moment, the only thing he could rely on to suppress his defeat was his soul power that was 2 ranks higher than his opponent's. In the history of alchemy, he had never heard of anyone being able to win a battle that was 2 ranks higher than themselves. This was also the source of his confidence. However, now that he discovered that other than soul power, the other party's comprehension of the art of Tao, refining techniques, and various fine control had surpassed his, he finally panicked. Just as Yuan Gaohan was worried about, Mo Huayuan had never experienced such an art competition, and he was even competing with an extremely unbalanced opponent. His mind was in a mess, and he immediately made a series of mistakes. This time, even little Xian, Jin Xian, and the other 2 could tell, and they revealed puzzled expressions. After this stage of condensation, the quality can be more or less set. This 4 revolutions true pill is only a 4th-tier medicinal pill, it cannot undergo the heavenly tribulations tempering, so the probability of it being able to increase the grade when it finally condenses is not high. Master Mo, Yunxiao suddenly said, if you fail at the condensation stage, you will be completely defeated. If this is all Yuan Gaohan's disciple has, I'll be very disappointed. In the future, when I see him in person, I won't have any respect for him. Mo Huayuan's body trembled as if an electric current had passed through his body, and he broke out in a cold sweat. This was a competition that they absolutely could not lose. His master's honor and the promise of the Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce were more important than his own life. He couldn't lose even if he died. Mo Huayuan's eyes lit up, and the look of fear and panic on his face disappeared. The hand seals in his hands slowed down slightly, and his entire person gradually entered a state of calmness. He was no longer disturbed by the outside world, and his entire aura changed. Jin Xian, little Xian, and the other 2 widened their eyes, not understanding what he was saying. It was as if Yunxiao was lecturing Mo Huayuan, and Mo Huayuan had accepted it in silence. They were completely confused.